You know the archetype. We've all seen them. Or maybe, if we're being honest, at some point we've been them.
Yeah.
You have a candidate for a top-tier leadership position, a VP, a director, C-suite material. And you look at their resume, and it isn't just good. It is, it's bulletproof.
The golden child candidate.
Exactly. Flawless pedigree, glowing endorsements, 20 years of progressive experience. Every single box is checked. On paper, they are the perfect hire. You almost feel silly interviewing them.
Yeah, you just want to hand them the keys and ask where they want their desk.
But you have to do the interview. It's due diligence, right? You can't just hire someone off a PDF.
Of course not.
So they walk into the room. They're polite, professional. They answer every question with these complete sentences. They don't spill their water. They don't make a single offensive joke. They smile at all the right times. And yet, 30 minutes later, they walk out, the door clicks shut, and the panel just looks at each other and says no.
It happens constantly, and it's usually followed by this really confused silence, because if you ask the panel why, they struggle to articulate it. They just say things like, it didn't feel right, or they weren't ready, or my favorite, I just didn't see it.
Which is baffling to me. I mean, if the record proves you can do the job and you didn't mess up the interview, where is the disconnect? And that is exactly what we're unpacking today. We have this fascinating presentation from a Chief Master Sergeant, Christian Skierski, that just completely demystifies this phenomena.
A real heavy hitter in leadership development.
Oh, seriously. For context, Skierski is operating at the E9 level Command Chief Master Sergeant. In the military hierarchy, that is the top 1% of the enlisted force. These are the people advising generals. They are operating at a strategic level that, most of us only dream of.
And while the source material is framed for that specific military context, trying to get promoted to that top 1%, the principles he lays out are a masterclass in executive communication. It doesn't matter if you're aiming for the Pentagon, a boardroom in Silicon Valley, or a directorship at a nonprofit. The game is the exact same.
Okay, so let's solve the mystery. Why does the perfect candidate fail? What's the core thesis here?
Well, Skierski diagnoses this as a failure of executive readiness. And the first thing we have to wrap our heads around is a fundamental shift in the purpose of the interview.
Okay, so usually we think the purpose is, I need to prove I'm qualified, I need to show I have the skills.
And that is the trap. That is where everyone goes wrong. At this level, executive level, E9 level, the interview is not about determining if you are qualified. Your record already proved that. The resume got you the seat. The panel assumes you have the technical skills. They know you can manage a budget. They know you can lead a team.
So if they aren't checking your qualifications, what on earth are they doing?
They're running a simulation. They're testing executive readiness. Skierski calls it the visibility gap. The panel isn't asking, can they do the job? They're asking, can we see how they think?
That's a crucial distinction. It's the black box problem. I can see the output, your resume, your awards, but I can't see the processing unit inside your head.
Precisely. The source describes this recurring pattern where highly capable candidates, people who are absolute rock stars in their current roles, they just lose all momentum in the interview. And it's not because they aren't leaders, but because their leadership isn't visible in real time.
Because they're relying on the resume to do the talking for them.
Yes. They assume their leadership is implied. They think, I led a team of 500, therefore you know I'm a leader. But the panel needs to see the mechanism of that leadership. They need to see how you process data, how you weigh risks, and how you make decisions under pressure.
It's almost like the interview is a stress test for your operating system.
Yeah.
They want to see the code running, not just a screenshot of the app.
That's a great way to put it. And to pass that stress test, you can't just give the right answers or the polite answers. You have to broadcast specific signals. Skierski identifies 3 of these executive signals. If you hit these, you remove doubt. If you miss them, you're just another qualified person who didn't make the cut.
Okay, let's break these down, because I feel like I've probably missed these signals in my own life. Signal number 1, problem framing.
Problem framing. And it sounds academic, but it's really about speed and triage. When an executive is thrown a curveball, a question about a past failure or some hypothetical crisis, the panel is watching the first 30 seconds intensely.
And what are they looking for?
They're looking for structure. Most people, when they're asked about a complex issue, they start with chronology. They start telling a story from the beginning. Well, it was a Tuesday, and the server went down, and then Bob called me, and...
The drift. You're just recounting events. You're taking me on a journey I didn't ask to go on.
Exactly. You're drifting. Skierski argues that an executive framer immediately identifies 3 things: what mattered, why it mattered, and this is the big one, What was at stake?
What was at stake? Wow, that raises the temperature immediately.
It does. I mean, think about the difference. A mid-level manager describes the issue. They'll say, we had a supply chain break. An executive defines the crisis. They say, our supply chain broke, which threatened to halt operations for 3 weeks and cost us our biggest client.
I see the difference. The first one is a status report. The second one is a threat assessment.
Correct. And that threat assessment proves you understand the bigger picture. If you can't articulate the consequence of the problem, the panel just assumes you don't get the gravity of the situation. They lose confidence because they can't see you prioritizing. They start thinking, does this person know we almost went bankrupt?
So signal 1 is about proving you can spot the fire, identify the fuel, and predict the damage quickly, before you even tell me how you put it out.
Right. Without getting lost in the weeds of who called who or what time the meeting was, frame the stakes first.
Got it. Let's move to signal 2. This is the one that I think trips up the most people, especially in cultures that really value teamwork. Signal 2 is decision ownership.
Decision ownership. And you're right, this is where the wheels usually fall off. We are conditioned from day one in school, in sports, and entry-level jobs to say we.
There's no I in team. We have that tattooed on our brain.
We're terrified of sounding arrogant. We don't want to look like we're taking all the credit, so we deflect. We accomplished this. I supported the team. We collaborated on a solution.
And in a normal conversation, that's just polite. It's being a good colleague. But you're saying in an executive evaluation, it's fatal.
It's fatal because the panel isn't interviewing your team. They are interviewing you. They are about to hand you a massive amount of responsibility. If everything is we, they have no data on your personal judgment.
It allows a candidate to hide. I mean, you can ride the coattails of a high-performing team without ever actually making a tough call yourself. We won the championship. Yeah, but you were on the bench.
Exactly. Yeah, the source is brutal on this point. The panel needs to hear the specific judgment call you made. And it goes deeper than just, I decided X. They need to hear the trade-offs.
Trade-offs. Okay, now we're getting into the mechanics of strategy. Why is that word trade-off so important here?
Because every single executive decision implies risk. You're giving up something to get something else. Speed versus quality. Short-term pain versus long-term gain. If you tell a story where everything was perfect, everyone agreed, and there were no downsides, you aren't showing executive thinking, you're telling a fairy tale.
Right. We decided to work harder, and everyone was happy, and we made $1 billion.
Yeah.
That's not leadership. That's magic.
Exactly. And executives know that magic doesn't exist. Real leadership is. I chose to delay the launch to fix the bug, accepting that we'd missed the quarterly target and I'd have to take the heat from the board.
That is so powerful because you are explicitly stating the cost. You're saying, I knew the price and I paid it.
And that shows calculation. It shows you aren't just reacting, you are weighing variables. You're gambling with the company's resources intelligently. If you can't articulate the trade-off, the panel assumes you didn't see it. Or worse, that you just got lucky.
So we obscures your role, but I creates accountability. And accountability is scary.
It is. It feels exposed, but that's the point. Executive leadership is exposure. You're the one who takes the blame if it goes wrong. If you aren't willing to use I in the interview, they won't trust you to use I when the crisis hits.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we've framed the problem, what's at stake, we've owned the decision, the trade-off. That brings us to signal 3, outcome clarity.
Outcome clarity. This seems simple, did it work? But the source highlights a very specific trap here. The confusion between activity and impact.
Oh, I see this all the time on resumes. A laundry list of verbs. Coordinated, attended, facilitated, managed.
The hamster on a wheel defense. Look how much I'm sweating. Look how fast I'm running.
But I'm not actually going anywhere.
The panel does not care how hard you worked. They honestly don't. They don't care how many meetings you sat in. They care about what changed. Skierski defines outcome clarity with 3 specific questions. What changed? What improved? And this is key. What endured?
What endured? That points to sustainability, doesn't it?
Right. Did you just put a Band-Aid on it, or did you fix the system? Did the solution fall apart the moment you left the room? The source says if the panel has to guess what the result was, the answer failed. The impact must be unmistakable.
This feels like a good moment to ground this. Because all this theory is great, but we need to hear what it actually sounds like. The source provides a before and after scenario, a safe answer versus an executive answer. I think we should role-play this a bit because hearing the difference is just shocking.
Let's do it. It's the best way to hear the tone shift.
Okay, I'll be the candidate. I'm well-meaning, qualified, trying to be humble, and a good team player. Here's my answer to a question about a challenge I faced. I worked closely with multiple stakeholders, supported leadership priorities, and ensured alignment as requirements evolved.
Okay, cut. As a listener, how does that land?
It sounds
Hmm.
corporate, safe, professional. It sounds like something I'd read on a performance review.
It sounds like a LinkedIn bio generated by AI. I mean, look at the content. Worked closely. What does that mean? Did you lead the meeting or bring the coffee? Supported priorities. Which ones? Ensured alignment. How? By sending an email or by firing someone?
It's all fluff. It describes a process, but there's no person in it. It's a ghost story.
And nothing in that answer is factually wrong. But nothing in it removes doubt about your ability to lead. I have zero idea if you can make a hard decision. Now, let's look at the executive version of that same story. This is how Skiersky suggests framing it.
Okay, same scenario, but with the executive signals turned on. Here's the rewrite. The unit was failing inspections. I decided to rebuild the training model, accepted short-term disruption, and inspection write-ups dropped 40% within 6 months.
Boom. Do you feel the difference in velocity?
It's aggressive. It punches you in the face with facts.
Let's trace the signals. First, signal one problem framing. The unit was failing inspections.
Clear, urgent, undeniable. No fluff. No, we were facing some challenges.
Then signal two, decision ownership. I decided to rebuild the training model, accepted short-term disruption.
There it is, the trade-off. Accepted short-term disruption.
Exactly. That phrase is doing so much heavy lifting. It tells the panel, I knew this would be messy. I knew people would complain. I knew productivity would dip. But I had the guts to do it anyway because the long-term fix was worth it.
And then signal 3, outcome clarity. Inspection write-ups dropped 40% within 6 months.
You can't argue with that. It's not, we did better. It's dropped 40%. The first answer was about being a good participant. The second answer was about being a driver of change.
You know, hearing that second answer, it actually feels a little risky to say out loud. It feels almost arrogant compared to the first one.
And that brings us to a really interesting point from the source about respectful behavior. Usually, we think being respectful in an interview means being modest, deferential, maybe a little quiet about our own achievements. We don't want to brag.
Right. We've been taught that humility is a virtue. Let the work speak for itself.
Skiersky flips that completely upside down. He calls this executive approach senior direct. In this context, at this level, respect does not mean modesty. It means respecting the panel's need for clarity.
That's a massive mindset shift. So you're saying that being vague, even if you're doing it to be humble, is actually disrespectful to the process.
Yes, because your job in that room is to remove doubt. If you are so humble that the panel can't figure out if you can handle the pressure, you have failed the evaluation. You're wasting their time. You haven't given them the data they need to trust you with the organization.
Remove doubt. That is such a clear mission statement. It stops being about, look at me, and starts being about, here's the evidence you asked for.
The source says explicitly, at this level, your responsibility is clarity, not humility, not modesty, visibility.
I want to circle back to the pressure element. We mentioned earlier that the interview is a stress test. Why is that simulation so important? Why isn't a good track record enough?
Because a track record is historical. It tells you what happened in the past, often with a lot of support, time, and resources. Maybe you had a great team that carried you. Maybe the market was just up. An interview simulates a crisis. It forces you to synthesize information and articulate a path forward right now with eyeballs on you.
It tests your processing speed.
Exactly. If you can't frame a problem clearly in a quiet, air-conditioned room with a panel of 3 people, how are you going to frame a crisis when the building is literally or metaphorically on fire and the press is calling?
If you fumble the story of a decision you made 2 years ago, how can we trust you to make a decision that affects thousands of people tomorrow morning?
And that puts the baffling scenario we started with into perspective. The candidate with the perfect resume who fails. They failed the stress test. They proved they could do the work, but they didn't prove they could carry the weight.
So let's make this practical for our listeners, whether they're prepping for a promotion, a new job, or even a pitch to investors, because, let's be honest, investors are buying leadership just as much as hiring managers are.
Absolutely. They're buying the decision maker, not just the product.
So how can they do a self-assessment? How do they know if they're drifting or delivering?
The source suggests a visibility check. It's a set of 3 questions you should ask yourself about your key stories. Think about the last high-stakes conversation or interview you had.
Okay, question 1.
Can the other person clearly hear how I framed the problem? Did I explicitly state what was at stake, or did I just list events?
Question 2.
Did they hear the decision I personally owned, not what we did? Did I articulate the judgment call and the trade-off I accepted?
And question 3.
Did they hear the outcome that changed because of my intervention? Is the impact undeniable, or is it just a description of hard work?
It sounds like if you can't answer yes to all of those, you need to rewrite your script.
You absolutely do. And I want to be clear. This isn't about lying or bragging. It's about excavation.
Excavation.
Yes, you probably did make the decision. You probably did weigh the trade-offs, but you've buried the lead under layers of corporate speak and we language. You have to dig it out and put it on the table.
It's funny, we often think of executive presence as purely aesthetic. How you dress, how firm your handshake is. Do you have a commanding voice? But this deep dive suggests that true executive presence is actually about the architecture of your thinking.
That's a beautiful way to put it. The architecture of your thinking. Can you build a logical structure that stands up to scrutiny? That is what readiness looks like. It's not about being loud, it's about being lucid.
I love that. Okay, so let's recap the 3 pillars of executive readiness from Chief Master Sergeant Skiersky before we wrap up.
Pillar 1, frame the problem. Don't just tell me what happened, tell me what was at stake.
Pillar 2, own the decision. Don't hide behind we. Show me the judgment and the trade-offs you accepted.
And pillar 3, land the outcome. Don't tell me you were busy. Tell me what improved and what endured.
Simple, but definitely not easy.
No, it requires fighting against a lot of our social conditioning. It feels uncomfortable to say, I did this.
Which brings us to our final thought for the day. We've talked a lot about the mechanics of the interview, but there's a deeper philosophical point here to chew on.
There is, and it's something I want everyone to sit with. We often hide behind words like collaboration and support because they're safe. They spread the risk. If we failed, it's not just on me. It shields our ego.
But the interview room isn't a safe space.
No. The question is, if you were in a room where your only goal was to make your judgment visible, not your likability, not your team spirit, but your raw capacity for judgment, how would your story change?
That is a scary question. It forces you to stand alone.
It does. But if you want the seat at the head of the table, that's the price of admission. You have to be willing to stand alone.
Well, on that slightly terrifying but empowering note, we are going to leave you to rethink your safe stories. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure.
See you next time.
If this conversation made you rethink how leadership is evaluated, you'll want to stay with Frontline Leadership. Follow, subscribe, and join us as we break down what decision makers are really listening for when the stakes are high.